There's no doubt that the first part of the novel will always be iconic thanks to the White Radish and his unique charisma, which had us laughing at his silly antics, especially that incredible Reader X Cale Henitsue fanfic he wrote all by himself. Because even though years have passed since the first part ended, and I feel old remembering those dark days of the hiatus when I was in high school, nothing will ever top the laughs that scene gave me. And it's true. We have to give him credit because he really was a good villain. From the beginning, with the mystery of who ARM really is, as we gradually discovered that the threads of this organization were tangled all over the world and involved super shady things like black mana and practically every single misfortune that had happened over the last few centuries. Above all, what I consider the climax, the ancient White Star. I swear right here that as I was reading and seeing how these connections formed between the ancient powers Cale possessed, the heroes, the forbidden zones, and the ancient times, I could feel my brain forming wrinkles in real time. However, in the end, it all led to the same point: the desire of someone, a human being, to be something more, to be a god, and to rule over others. But was this goal, everything he did, actually achievable, and could it have yielded results? The White Thing had a pretty solid plan if you look at it from the perspective of ordinary people like you, me, and people from Nameless One in general. I mean, just imagine the look on the Goddess of Balance's face when she went to check on the reincarnation cycle, and the first thing she's handed is a contract expressly accepted by the God of Death, signed by the last Dragon Lord and the first Dragon Hunter, who is also a single lifer. Seriously, one of the worst Mondays in history ever seen. Now, because of that contract, there was a soul who could legally reincarnate with their memories for what appeared to be an indefinite period in the same world. This in itself is a point in the White Star's favor, not only for demonstrating intelligence and exploiting a loophole in a contract that had been in place for millennia, but also for showing us, the readers, just how far he was willing to go to achieve his dreams, even if that meant the death of all his loved ones and a life of perpetual suffering. But that was all? Just a dreamer with no ground to stand on? Now, an interesting point is how the power balance switches as we discover more about him. Because suddenly we are not just a third party with practically omniscient level knowledge of the entire world, their people, and what they're going to do. The content of the birth of a hero ended. Now we are on our own, and the more information we gathered, the more we understand how prepared are the enemies. That feeling of having everything under control that we had at the beginning of the novel, when we knew what was going to happen, just vanished. And the uncertainty grows when we discover the truth behind the war from 10,000 years ago. Now we know that his conviction was well-founded, because in his world, as far as he could see and understand, there had already been a precedent. Someone who had indeed come close to achieving it, that person known as the Ancient White Star. A war was waged against him. Entire kingdoms bowed before him. He controlled the weather at will, and yet the most faithful proof that such a person existed was himself. The fact that he, Cale Barrow, found himself in the middle of a village that brought together the so-called Dragon Hunters, founded millennia ago for the sole purpose of preventing another similar catastrophe, gave him every reason to believe it was possible. The only reason the previous White Star had failed was because he wasn't prepared enough. He would be different. He already knew what it would take to obtain the power he needed. He had something more. Time. Time to reach his goal. More than just a single lame human life. And finally, the ultimate proof came his way. A group of powerful, mysterious individuals was helping him. Nothing could stand in his way. Absolutely fucking not. When I say that White Star could never have been a god, I'm not just talking about Cale's intervention or the God of Death, or the fact that he was practically nothing more than a tool for the hunters. I'm referring to the incredible imbalance of knowledge that actually existed. We already understood that achieving divinity couldn't possibly be easy. At this point, after reading so many chapters, Trash of the Counts Family showed no signs of being like the typical martial arts novel where you The dog, the neighbor, and any young master from any sect could simply proclaim themselves a god. And yet we were still afraid of it. We firmly believed it was possible. The monsters of Korea, the sealed god, this world not being fiction but part of a multiverse series. The scale of things seemed too vast for it not to be possible. Until it wasn't. It's when we get into the second part of the novel, the laws of the hunt, and start traveling between worlds, fighting the hunters, that we finally begin to grasp the true depth of things. Seeing how the hunters destroy worlds, not just in a metaphorical sense, but literally by draining their source, is when we realize there are levels to this shit. All to create a single god, one who is very powerful and absolute, yes, but at the end of the day, it's all a gigantic organization that has gone so far as to create a new world just to achieve its goals. Suddenly, the White Star seems so insignificant. Did the Moguru Empire manage to amass a pit of corpses and dead mana? Yes, but there's a world where dead mana practically falls like rain. Did he possess ancient powers that, once combined, could more or less control the weather? Also yes, but the blue and purple-blooded families nearly caused a tsunami just by breaking a seal. Or maybe he actually became a threat because he interfered with the world tree in the first timeline. Of course, but the dragons of Apatu practically had a straw stuck in the world spring for their own personal use. And it's not that I'm looking down on the White Star, it's just that the more we know, the more we realize we were only seeing the tip of the iceberg. We could say that Cale Barrow was just an ignorant man with too much ambition who didn't really understand how the world order works, but if he is, then so is Cale, and so are we. Throughout the novel, we're always on the same level as Cale. We discover information at the same time he does. And if there's something he doesn't want to know, then we won't know it either. That's why it's so frustrating when he cuts off another character and tells them not to tell him. The clearest example is when he refused to know how the greedy fire came to be a world unto itself. Cale doesn't want to know, but we do, and yet there's nothing we can do about it. But that means the White Star was, in fact, the threat we thought it was because that was simply what we knew based on the information we had at hand. In the end, the plot has always been about war and chaos. And what is most valuable in battle? And knowledge. Information about the future is what we had at the beginning with the TBOH volumes. Information is what Cale was so concerned with gathering during his time as commander and in his fight against the White Star. The World Tree faced major repercussions for giving us knowledge it shouldn't have. When we realized that the priestess of the god of war was actually a saint, we shit ourselves instantly because we knew that saints are the eyes of the gods, so all that time, crucial information had been leaking out. And in the end, that's what we're doing right now. Looking for information about the hunters' plans, what's happening with the demonic race, who the celestial race is, why they got involved with humans who have unique abilities, and many other things. But at the same time, knowing more also means getting deeper into dangerous matters. So can we really blame Cale for refusing to learn more useless things? Where does all this leave the White Star? Well, right where he's always been and where we started. A person who, although he knew he had to gain power to move forward, didn't have enough information to grasp the true magnitude of the problems unfolding, so his plans were limited in how much success they could achieve. Terrorize the world of Roan and rule as a tyrant? Of course, he succeeded in the first timeline with the original Cale. Let's not forget that, but maintain control indefinitely? No way. In the end, the hunters would have sacrificed the world for their own interests, and I doubt they would have taken the radish with them, unless they were planning to make soup. Cale and his group of scammers fought to protect the people and their world, but whether they succeeded or not, the White Star's fate was already sealed. So, even if a bit silly at times, The White Star remains a great villain during the first part of the novel, and serves as a reference point for just how much the universe is expanding as you read the second part, showing us that we were only scratching the surface of the lake. And that's it. First video. I know the edition is a bit bad, but thank you so much if you decided to watch it regardless. Next week I wanted to talk about Cale and his life. These are just videos I make because I love so much this novel, and I have to talk about it. If someone finds them entertaining, that would be amazing.